Welcome to the Healthcare Technology Report, a leading information source on healthcare technology companies and solutions. In this episode, we speak with Jieun Choe, Chief Operating Officer of Viz, an AI-powered care coordination platform that helps clinical teams detect disease earlier and coordinate treatment faster. Viz began in stroke imaging and has expanded into cardiology, oncology, and more than 50 AI-enabled care pathways, combining real-time clinical data with workflow tools that help teams act on alerts and move patients to the right specialist and guideline-directed care. The Viz platform is deployed in roughly 2,000 hospitals across the United States. Jieun became COO in September 2025 after serving as Viz's Chief Product and Marketing Officer and Chief Marketing Officer. Her background includes executive leadership roles at Certara, as well as earlier experience in medical devices at Guidant Boston Scientific. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow. Hi, Jieun. Thanks so much for taking the time. Great to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, RJ.
So we saw each other briefly at NYC Awards Night. Thank you for making it to the event, and congratulations on being one of the awardees who was recognized. I think a good place to start is to talk about AI and health tech. And within that, we'll go into Viz AI because your technology is very sophisticated, is very advanced, and it's already being used in thousands of hospitals. So maybe to set the stage, let's talk about AI, health tech, and within that, Viz AI.
So, I think AI started out, at least in healthcare, many, many years ago in the imaging space, which happens to be where Viz started. But that was 10 years ago. And that market has really evolved into generative AI, agentic AI. So we've seen that evolution and lived that evolution in the past 10 years, which has been both exciting, but also, a journey of changes as things have evolved. And a lot of the initial AI did start out in stroke. If you look at the approvals that we got, not just us, but others in the field in the neuro space. And then it did start to evolve pretty quickly, went into vascular, cardiology. And now we're pulling from the EHR, those insights. We're able to now cover many, many diseases that aren't just imaging based, but also based on the insights, what's happening with patients across the longitudinal timeframe, and being able to then also match it to the guidelines so that more patients get on guideline-directed care.
And, when one thinks about Viz, what is the predominant solution it provides? Is it in the stroke area, in that immediate imaging to diagnosis?
Well, that was definitely where we started out in stroke. And so we are known for that because we did get the first approval for stroke in 2018. So that's kind of where we started. However, those are our roots. But now we're definitely across the spectrum, not just in neuro, but in cardiology. We got the first ECG AI approved a few years back. And that was for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but that's also expanded. We just announced a partnership with Alnylam in cardiac amyloidosis. So our cardiology platform has definitely blossomed and expanded over time. We also got into oncology in the past year and breast cancer and prostate cancer. So now we're expanding beyond the imaging and now across so many different diseases, I would say over 50 in care pathways that we offer to our healthcare systems so that we can support the enterprise entirely. So the way that I describe Viz today is more like the clinical AI infrastructure layer that sits kind of alongside the EHR to provide support across many clinical domains. So we've definitely expanded from where we started, which we're known for in terms of stroke. And even in neuro, we cover aneurysm, hemorrhage. But even back then, say 7-8 years ago, we were already starting to get into other areas such like vascular. So the story's definitely evolved and expanded in terms of how we support our clinicians.
Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful video, I think it was with Forbes, up on your site. And I think at the time, I'm not sure when it was produced, but your founder references, I think, 900 hospitals. And today you're in 2,000. So
that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Was that original go to market is like, we're going to go talk to the hospitals and see how we can kind of establish the relationship there? It seems like you could have gone directly to the EHR, but maybe through regulatory reasons, you have to go through the hospital, in terms of like the data or imaging that gets shared. I'm just curious, the strategy of bringing the solution to market.
Yeah, well, initially it was via DICOM integrations for the imaging, and it has evolved so that now we are getting EHR integrations. So I would say it's two-pronged approach in terms of embedding ourselves into the healthcare system as the clinical workflow solution and that AI layer that I talked about. And so the go-to-market was actually very organic in that because we had so much engagement, and the engagement is really real. When you have software that's being looked at under 5 minutes, it's 90% of clinicians are looking at those alerts and trying to figure out, okay, what's that next step? How do I get the care team? How do I activate them? Who do I refer the patient to? So it's truly a system of action and has been for a really long time from the get-go in trying to get to the next step and actually coordinate care. And I think that was really the foundation of the company. That wasn't just about AI, but pairing it with care coordination. What do you do next? And being able to share those insights across the healthcare system and chat and share images, all HIPAA compliant, and being able to do the what's next after the AI. Because there are a lot of AI algorithm companies, right, out there, but it's really what you do with it that truly matters. And that's that workflow piece that I talked about, that system of action that we've been. And so once people started using it, that stickiness was real because they were constantly in Viz, triaging and coordinating care. And then that started to spread from neuro to vascular to cardiology because a lot of conditions are cross clinical domains, right? So let me give you an example. In the stroke care pathway, for a good percentage, it's cryptogenic stroke. They don't know the genesis of stroke. And the guidelines say they should get a cardiology workup because their stroke could be coming from other conditions that are cardiac related, such as atrial fibrillation. And so how do you coordinate that flow from the neuro group to the cardiology group? And so we created supports for that end-to-end patient journey and supporting that, so that the appropriate stroke patients get the cardiology follow-up. So you can see how that starts to kind of snowball and starts to intertwine itself, right, to other clinical domains. So that was part of the organic piece. I think the second piece was the evidence, what was published, right? The data, the proof points, the real world evidence that physicians and administrators rely on to understand the proof behind the solution. And that is really, really important in healthcare, that independent support of data that says, here's how this works, here are the benefits, here's what happened to length of stay, disability, and all of that. So that clinical and economic outcomes, those are all documented in more than 120 publications out there. And so that also laid that groundwork for expansion because there's definitely word of mouth and trust, but the proof in the pudding is really in the data too.
And you alluded to maybe other AI solutions out there. With Viz, when it's embedded into the system, are there other solutions that a healthcare system would use as well that would overlap? Or does Viz, given it's like the main workflow tool, or it can be the main workflow tool, it kind of encompasses a large majority of the needs? How does it work? Or, I think there's like some competitive dynamics here too. Like if you get into the healthcare system first and you start expanding the features, then you can crowd out potentially other AI solutions.
No, that's a great question, RJ. And I think for us, it's really not about the competitive elements. I'm not saying there isn't competition in this space, but we see ourselves as being the last mile delivery of AI and care coordination. So we very much see ourselves as complementary and creating the larger ecosystem. Our goal isn't to say we're going to crowd out somebody else, but how do we work with other solutions so that we create and tailor an ecosystem of supports that work for the healthcare system. So I can tell you that we have an offering in ambient listening. However, if the healthcare system is using a different ambient listening tool, we are more than happy to do that integration to support it end to end. What healthcare systems don't want to do is log into and support lots of different systems, right? But because we are that workflow tool and on that daily basis, if you integrate with Viz, then Viz is that layer and it's a single sign-on, right? And it's a seamless experience so that we can port in other solutions as kind of creating that larger ecosystem. So a lot of it is under the hood, actually. So they're not logging into different things. But our goal is to be that ecosystem because a lot of what we own and manage is that last mile delivery of AI and other tools. And so I'm not saying there isn't competition, but our goal is really what's in the best interest of the healthcare system. And if they say, hey, we want you to integrate with this, we're more than happy to support that so that those integrations are seamless and that they have a unified ecosystem to work with.
And then, maybe switching gears a little bit to the more business of Viz, can you give us a sense for the scale of the business? We referenced 2,000 hospitals or 2,000 plus. At what phase is the company in its life cycle, and where do you see it heading in the next 3 years or so?
Yeah, so I would say our growth has been pretty tremendous, and we've got a business model flywheel that kind of supports each other. So as you know, we've started out in healthcare, and then we also started supporting life science customers around clinical trial recruitment, as well as amplifying the market development of finding patients and to get them on guideline-directed care.
Mm-hmm.
And so that work has been really important in fueling innovation on our platform. And so that supports this expansion and getting into other clinical domains. So we help to find and not only get patients to care, but the right specialist and get them on guidelines. So we're happy to announce a little while ago a partnership with Guidelines for Cancer, and we have guidelines for pulmonary disease. So what we're trying to do is support identifying patients for the right treatments that the clinician decide as clinician decision support. And we've got some really great data on this, kind of shorten the path to treatment, because we do find that in many conditions, patients are sometimes lost, like they get the wrong diagnosis or they don't get the right diagnosis. They think it's something else. And that happens in conditions like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, where a study out of a university showed that we're able to cut that by years, as long as 16 years, where patients they found were in the system, but sometimes diagnosis can be really hard. And we see AI as supporting that and providing advancement in helping humans and clinicians have better information, right, to make that call around disease like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
You've got some notable investors on your cap table. Can you tell us a little bit about the value that they've brought to the company aside from the financial capital?
Yeah. Well, we're really lucky to have such a great board and set of investors who are really very strategic and have so much wealth of experience across many industries, right, including healthcare. So we have a very supportive board, and they give us insights on what their lens is. Sometimes when you're in the company, like I've been, and I'm nearing 4 years, you can be very laser focused on what's happening in your role, your job, your company. I think they've got this landscape viewpoint across many companies and industries that really does give us insights and ground us in reality, which has been great.
Mm-hmm. We always like to talk a little bit more about the kind of personal side so folks in the audience can get to know you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Korea, and I came to the States when I was about 6. Grew up in Rochester, New York, upstate, so very cold. And basically, we came here to the States because my father was seeking higher education. So he ended up getting his PhD at University of Rochester. And I think there were initial goals to go back, but then we ended up staying and moved to California. So I grew up primarily in California and was there for more than 20 years. And now I'm in New York City. My husband is a doctor. He's an ear surgeon. We moved to New York for his job. But now my kids are out of the house. I'm an empty nester. They're actually, ironically, they were born in the Bay Area, but we moved soon to New York. We've been in New York for about 20 years, and now they're back in California in college. So my 2 boys are west in Northern California and loving it. So I guess those roots are really hard to get rid of, and they love the California weather, the vibe, the culture. So yeah, so it's really, honestly, I couldn't ask for more. It was really the American dream. We never anticipated staying. And the opportunities were real in terms of tough. We came from humble beginnings, but we had a lot of opportunity in terms of education and supports in our system to thrive and to learn and to grow. I can't say all of it was easy, but the journey's been pretty incredible.
Well, you have a super impressive background, Stanford undergrad, Stanford Business School, Boston Scientific. It looks like you may have spent a little bit of time with a company in Princeton, Certara.
Yes, I did.
And I happen to live in Princeton, so I kind of
Oh,
know the area pretty well and the various businesses around here. I guess if there's one thing to kind of highlight along your journey, frequently there's like these insights you'll get along the way as you're really trying to discover what you want to do,
yeah.
right, with your professional career. Was there a moment? It could have been early career, it could have been through business school, or even at some of the companies you worked at, or maybe now, where it's kind of like, this is what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. So I took some time off, primarily for my children.
Hmm.
So there was a clear trade-off in my mind, and it was non-regrettable. I knew that at a point where my husband, we had moved here, he needed to build his practice, and the kids were really little. My younger one was 6 months old, and my older one was almost 3. And there were needs at home around healthcare that I needed to take care of. And so that was a break I took that was very intentional because my kids needed me at home and we needed to navigate a healthcare situation. And so I have really appreciated being able to feel empowered around those choices. And I think it's for everyone to understand what is their risk tolerance and what is my risk tolerance at certain points in time. And when I made the jump to go to Viz, and I was at Certara, I was in an amazing role, and I wasn't actually looking to leave. And this is before ChatGPT. So you can imagine when I was telling people I was going to an AI company, it seemed very foreign at the time.
Hmm.
Why would you give up a position like that at a publicly traded company, chief strategy and marketing officer, to go to a much smaller startup in AI? So it sounded outlandish and kind of crazy. And that was kind of the reaction I got from certain people, right? Like, why? That doesn't make logical sense.
Hmm.
And I think my reply back then was, first, I had gone to a hospital nearby, Mount Sinai, and seen the product in action with a doctor who was very gracious enough for me to be there. I was standing in the lab and seeing a patient being treated with Viz in their hands, looking at the clot. And so that was for me a pivotal moment where I thought, wow, this is real and I can take risk. And I think the risk paid off for me, at least in the way that I see it in my journey. And so I think people sometimes have fear about risk, but nothing is permanent. You can always decide to do something else. So for me, that's been my learning is what is my risk tolerance? And I can say at some points in my life, my risk tolerance actually wasn't high. But at some other points in my life, I found my risk tolerance was actually pretty high and I was able to take risk and feel safe and know that, hey, if things don't go the way that I anticipate, I don't control outcomes. I can do the best to influence outcomes, but outcomes are what they may be. And to the extent that I control what I control, I focus on that. And the things I don't control, I have to let go.
That's a great insight. We're entering the tail end of the conversation. I have two final questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who's had a profound influence on you?
Yep. I've had so many influences from different people across my life. So it's really, really hard to pick one. I would say someone who has really taken me under their wing and who I appreciate a lot is someone I met more than 20 years ago. And her name is Amy Diwali. And we're still close today. We go vacationing together and spend a lot of time. And she really did take me under her wing when I first started at Guidant. And we used to call her the diva because she could sell ice cream to Eskimos. That's what we said about her. And she was our top leading salesperson. And we got to build a trust and a friendship that holds to this day. And the thing I love about our relationship is that I can go to her with a problem or she can tell me how she sees it, right? And it's unfiltered.
Hmm.
I know I can trust her to give me the truth in terms of how she sees it, right? And her lens. And I think it's so important to have someone like that in your life who is going to give you that outside perspective, who's going to give you the bad, the good, and the ugly to your face. And for me, that's important. That's important. I don't want people to tell me something that's rosy just because they think it'll make me happy. I'm less concerned about that. Not that I want to be sad either, but I'm just saying those are the relationships that I really love in my life to ground me in truth and to kind of give me the dirt or around a situation if I'm not seeing it, right? And if my lens is filtered and I'm not seeing it straight. So I would say Amy's been a big influence in my life, both personally and professionally.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
I am on the board of a group called Stroke Onward. And I joined the board last year. It was a really big decision for me because at that time I did have a younger son at home and he was applying to college. So there was a lot going on in my life, but I really felt that the mission of the group to support patients post-stroke, right? Get them the care that need, the rehabilitation. And that was very meaningful to me and my current work, but also personally. So I was really thankful to be able to be part of that work. And it's built an incredible community of support around aftercare in many illnesses. It's not about the treatment you just get in the hospital. It's the supports you get like ongoing for many years post the event or the exacerbation. And so it's been a really rewarding learning experience being involved in the nonprofit and the work after the work, because there's still a lot of supports that patients and families, caregivers need too.
Wonderful. Jieun, thank you again for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.